There's three steps to the main thrust of the theory. The first step, I usually describe it as irrefutable, indubitable. This step, I think, is just unquestionable, which is that there has to be something because nothingness is just not possible, basically. And I sometimes use an analogy of a light switch where on is like the existence of things and off would be the non-existence of things. And just by its definition, the off just isn't there. You know what I mean? So it can only be on. But in more technical terms, what that is when you have a true dichotomy and one of the options of the true dichotomy is logically impossible, the other one must always be true. And questions like, well, what caused it to exist, or what caused it to be the case, just stop making sense, because you don't have to cause something for which there's no alternatives. Causing the notion of causality always has in mind the idea that something could be or could fail to be. And if something cannot fail to be the case, then it doesn't need to be caused because it's never not the case. So that's the first step. The second step is the identification of the nature of that something that always is with data and logic, which I'd put the probability that that's correct probably around 90%. That seems to me a really graceful simplification of the details of the nature of existence. But it's the third step that I think is really open to revision. And the third step is what I usually call the derivation of specificity. It's basically, once you have the assertion of a transcendental ground that's necessarily the case, and you have an identification of the nature of that transcendental ground, the question naturally arises, okay, well, we have these sort of very high and mighty ideas about like the exact nature of existence. But I mean, how do we get from there to here is really the idea. How come this particular world with all its sort of specific and complex structure exists rather than any other world that conceivably could be the case instead? And the solution I present in DM theory is basically that there's that absolute data that necessarily exists, and then relative to that, sort of embedded within it as a kind of a context, a logical context, is theoretical data, right? Which I would think of as basically all the possible ways that data could exist, but doesn't on the most absolute level. And then in that possibility space of theoretical data, you have endless possible permutations of variables within which this world's a logical possibility. Here it is after all. And so you kind of get this world for free just because it's possible. It's naturally going to be contained in that possibility space.